tuning in. We are we're less than 10 minutes away from our afternoon program, which is Violetta Wolf, uh, Arthur Rowe Collection, and the Alfie Norville Museum. That's going to be a fun presentation. I've seen some glimpses of it before, or while we were setting up. That is the Alfie Norville Gem and Mineral Museum. Beautiful downtown Tucson. If you're in town and you haven't been there yet, you are doing yourself a disservice by not going there. It is an incredible building, uh, only surpassed by the awesomeness of it. Is really, it's a great place to go. I'm so glad that they were able to do that. Prior to this, it was over at the Flandau Science Center at the U of A campus. It's definitely a must-see thing when you're here. Um, Violetta is mic'd up. She's in the conference room right now, and we are going to go live with her in about 7 minutes. Tomorrow, if you're around, tomorrow is actually a special day. Tomorrow, we are going to have a at 11 a.m. We're going to have how rocks come to life. And if you've seen any of the Scarpelli stuff, you know exactly what I'm talking about, how incredible this artwork is, the painting-like mosaics that the Scarpellis are famous for. She's going to go into detail on that. And if you're really interested in that, go check out Blue Cap Productions. You will see that there are 4 videos that we did with Katia and Leonardo while they're here, because today is the last day of their in-house kind of seminars. So starting in about 5 minutes at 2 o'clock, they're going to have the final of the 4 days where if you're in town and you can come down, you can actually learn how they do it live. It's a live demonstration. You may even get a chance to kind of cut some of the stones yourself. Absolutely fascinating. We did a very quick, brief video overview of that. And so the 4th segment of that just launched today. So go to Blue Cat Productions YouTube channel and check that out. That is the Scarpelli stuff, and absolutely fantastic. So that's our talk tomorrow at 11 a.m. That's followed by Ksenia Veterova coming in at 1:30, and she is an absolutely wonderful mineral artist from Ukraine. And you must have seen her. We've done extensive coverage of her. She's a very close and dear friend. So she will talk tomorrow about her process of painting, what that's all about. But in the meantime, we are about 5 minutes away from today's talk with Violetta Wolf from the Alfie Norville Museum, talking about the Arthur Rowe collection and what they've done with it, and suggesting new ways that museums can engage the public audience. So 5 minutes, let me do some final checks and balances, I guess, and we will see you in a few minutes. We're going to leave you with a little music. joining us today. We are just about 2 minutes shy of today's presentation. That's Violetta Wolf from the Orville Museum talking about Arthur Rowe collection. We're going to start broadcasting in just about 1 minute. You can see, hey, there's Julian Gray. Hey, Julian. Well, there's Stuart, and Julian, and there's Violetta. So they are queued up, ready to go. We have just past the 1 minute mark, so seconds, less than 60 seconds. We're going to go live. So in the meantime, you're stuck here with me. Tomorrow, we'd love to see you back online. We're going to have Katia Scarpelli at 11 a.m. talking about how she and Leonardo incredible actually look like if you will, bringing these rocks to life in ways you may never have seen before. Followed by our 1:30 presentation from Ksenia Fedorova, wonderful mineral artist from Ukraine. You've seen her on all kinds of blue cap production videos, our coverage of the Munich show. She is absolutely wonderful. And so she's going to talk a little bit about her painting technique. That's going to be fun to see. We are at showtime. I'm going to switch over to the conference room there, and I'm going to let them know we're ready to go. Stu, we're ready to go, buddy. Again, today's presentation is Alfie Norville Museum curator Violetta Wolf. So let's cut over to Stu and get the party started.
Test. There we go. Hear me? Test.
Just a little bit louder, let's match the two, and then I think we're good to go.
Okay. Think we're good? Perfect.
Hi.
All right. Welcome everyone to the Tucson Fine Mineral Gallery. My name is Stu Niebert, and this afternoon it's my pleasure to introduce Violetta Wolf from the Alfie Norville Mineral Museum here in Tucson, and her presentation. So, Violetta, without any further ado, thank you so much.
Great. Thanks so much. Ooh, is this too loud for people? Brian, are we good? Okay. Okay, awesome. Welcome. So my name is Violetta Wolf. I'm the director at the Alfie Norville Gem and Mineral Museum. And in my presentation, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, a little bit about our museum, and a little bit about the Arthur Rowe collection. So has anyone had a chance to visit us? Yes. Okay. So we are housed in this beautiful 1929 historic courthouse building. The entrance of the museum is right there. Pointer. So we're located less than 5 minutes walk from here. So we're very close to the Fine Mineral Gallery, and we love being neighbors. So my background, the very first museum I got to work in was the Harvard Mineralogical and Geological Museum. And that's a museum that you get very spoiled if that's your first mineral museum. My second museum was the Museum of Science, Boston. Not too far from Harvard. Have any of you been to the Museum of Science? Yeah, great. So the Museum of Science is a more contemporary science center, but it still houses most of the collection of the Boston Society of Natural History, which is one of the earliest natural history collections in the United States. So we had a variety of specimens from the early 1800s that were also being used in our interpretive exhibits. So it was a very fun and challenging environment to present historic specimens and make sure that people get to enjoy them as well as their preservation. And what I specialized there was in collections management and exhibit development. So that meant I spent a lot of time in a basement in a dark room, working with all kinds of materials. So in natural history museums, we have some minerals and gems. We also have taxidermy, archaeological collections, a little bit of everything. And when we think about these natural specimens, they're both important to research, but also for exhibitions. And when we do exhibitions work, we can't approach things like a story, right? Everybody is going to read and go through an exhibit in a different way. And someone might look at one thing and read 5 labels. Someone might read your labels out of order. So it's definitely a challenge unto itself. Before joining the Alfie team, I was most recently at the Oakland Museum of California. And I was brought there to manage, again, the natural history collection. But the Oakland Museum has a little bit of everything. So as part of my work, I got to learn how to deal with art, historic objects, a little bit of everything, how to preserve them, how to make them available to researchers, and how to share them with the public. So this is where I spent most of my time when I was working in Oakland. We had a warehouse that was about the size of a city block, and it contained our 3 million collections items. So you can see here we have some massive pallet racking. These are my team. They're currently working on a slide collection of nature photography, where a specific photographer photographed the same locations year after year to track the ecological change. So as I said, we did a little bit of everything. And some of the projects I got to work on were upgrading our collection storage for the best preservation standards to make sure that all of the items we were entrusted with were cared for. So this is a collection of native basketry. As you can see, everything has a specific custom mount so that nothing collapses in storage, and you also don't ever have to directly handle the objects to provide them to researchers or prep them for exhibit. I also got to work on some things I never in my life thought I would have to understand, including rigging and installing outdoor sculpture, what kind of paint finish can survive California summers and winters. So that's one of the best things about working in a museum is you have to tackle every sort of challenge. So I know most of you have been to our museum, but I'm just going to give a quick overview. The Alfie Norval Gem and Mineral Museum is part of the University of Arizona. So our 3 key functions are preserving our collections and supporting research, providing an undergrad experience for our students, both through formal classes as well as just having an incredible resource in the museum. And then we also reach out to the public of Arizona. So we have 3 main exhibits. The first is Mineral Evolution. And this exhibit walks through how mineralogy and the story of our solar system are intertwined. So both by studying our solar system, we learn about minerals, and by studying minerals, we learn about our solar system. Our second gallery is devoted to Arizona. I think we all know Arizona is absolutely intertwined with mining, mineralogy. We're the home to the Tucson Gem and Mineral Show, so this is a huge part of our state. So we get to walk people through what makes our geology and mineralogy special. And then our last gallery is the Gem Gallery. And this is where we help make the connection between science and the beauty and artistry related to gems. Many people are very curious and don't get to see gems in that same context and see them both from a historic and scientific point of view. But here we're today to talk about the Arthur Rowe collection. So Arthur Rowe, he was born in 1912 in Victor, Colorado. This was the heart of Colorado gold mining. So he was exposed to mining and mineralogy from an early age. While it was not what he pursued professionally, it was something that captured his interest very early. He attended Oberlin College, where he received a bachelor's in chemistry, and he received his PhD from Northwestern. For his teaching career, he ended up at the University of North Carolina in the chemistry department, where he was the department head for several years. And he oversaw many theses and helped many students along on their own research. In 1959, he started working for the National Science Foundation in Washington, D.C. And while he was there, he worked on high school science standards and international cooperation between researchers. He moved to Tucson in his retirement, where he was a volunteer at the University of Arizona, as well as the Arizona Sonora Desert Museum. And I think at least I know one of you actually knows Arthur Rowe. Has anyone else met Arthur Rowe? Yeah. Perfect. So Arthur Rowe, his interest in micromounting started in 1934 when he met Lazard Kahn. And this is a picture of Lazard Kahn. He studied crystallography with Victor Goldschmidt and was a prominent mineralogist who also instilled this love of the scientific understanding of minerals in Arthur. This is a little bit of a sidetrack, but I had to share this. This is Lazard Kahn's gravestone. And this is the crystal structure of kahnite, which is the mineral that bears his namesake. And funnily enough, Dr. Charles Palachi, the longtime mineralogical curator at Harvard, is the one who named it after Lazard Kahn. So if any of you get to have a mineral named after you, I charge you, please consider this option. That is just a fun, amazing situation. So, Dr. Rowe collected micromounts. Are any of you micromounters? Awesome. So what a micromount is a small sample of mineral that gets permanently mounted into a box that has to be looked at under microfication. So we see here, this is a cuprite specimen. So this is probably at about 10 times magnification compared. And I'm gonna ask you to look very closely for that cuprite. Can anybody spot it? It's there. So micromounts, as small as they are, sometimes you have to go even smaller to find the interesting feature. I also really love that this is a piece from the Christmas mine. And if you look carefully, it was collected on December 27th of 1977. So I see a family road trip or a love of puns that it was collected very close to Christmas. So again, we're seeing this is the cuprite visible here. And it's not until you take it, this is probably closer to 20 to 30 times magnified. So why would anyone collect microminerals? There are several reasons. So the first is you can get some extremely perfect specimens. So this is a copper crystal, and we can see these wonderful needle-like crystals have formed. It doesn't look like there's any damage to any of them. They're delicate, they're tiny. Yeah. Oh, yep. And that's another fun thing is you'll get to see lots of familiar names. We also have this beautiful specimen of Diosphorite and Wardite. So we see here we have a large tabular crystal with several side growths. Again, they're all very nicely terminated crystals in a rather complicated formation. Seeing this at scale is not something you would come across every day. The other great thing about these is they're very resilient. That if you have extremely delicate minerals, if they're in a microform, it's pretty hard to break them when you're handling them. I brought a few samples for folks to take a look at after the talk. I think if I told my curator I was throwing a few wolfenites in my purse to take to the Fine Mineral Gallery, she would kill me. But if they're in microform, they can make the trip a lot more safely. So this is cacoxenite, which is, these are the they look like little puff balls. And this is a mineral that forms their needle-like formations that form in an orb. And again, at scale, if you touch any of those, you're going to break many of the crystals. So having a sample with many, many examples, completely undamaged, being able to handle them, again, this is not something that we would be able to work with easily if it was at scale or hand size. Another example of an extremely delicate sample would be our pyrite, which is impaled on millerite. It might be a little hard to see in the photo, but these thread-like forms are the millerite. And this is this locality, Halls Gap, Kentucky, is pretty famous for these combinations. But again, we have one that could be thrown in a purse and brought down the street to look at. The other very practical side to micromounts is they do not cost the same as a hand sample. So to build a really high quality collection, for example, this gold with very beautiful dendritic structures, if you're dealing with it on a small scale, it's much more affordable and practical, right? And I'm sure many of us, if it was life size, would love to have this sample, but it's also pretty spectacular in the miniature. So I apologize, this is not the best photo. The other thing that is really exceptional about micros is you can get really unusual minerals. There are some minerals that only occur on the microscopic scale, and there are certain forms that are only found there. So I actually brought this one with me so that you could actually enjoy it. And what we're looking at here is a formation of stibnite that has developed a twisted rod. So I think all of us are used to seeing stibnites with their nice straight crystal structures. And again, my photography skills are not impressive, but you can hopefully see the twisting formation. All right. The other great thing about micros is you can have a huge collection in a really small space. So this is the University of Arizona collection. This was the University of, the College of Mines collection that Arthur Rowe curated when he was volunteering at the university. And in this cabinet alone, we have about 5,000 specimens. So for those of you who've been to our museum, do you have any guesses of how many specimens might be on display? Half as many. So in our 12,000 square feet of galleries, we have about 2,000 to 3,000 minerals, depending on the status of our loans. But in this, it's the phone for reference. In that scale, we have 5,000 different specimens. So if you think about the time it would take you to go through an entire museum, but you could be sitting at a desk and whip through whatever you want. So most museums have some amount of micromount collections. They were really collected for the purpose of training, for giving people access to quite a lot of minerals to develop their skill set. These were used specifically to train the mining engineers of the college. But most of these collections are not actually digitized or very well accessible today. So we've done some survey work to understand this first collection that Arthur Rowe helped the university build. There's about a total of 8,000 specimens, 50% from Arizona, 28% from the USA, and 24% worldwide. So when we open a drawer, this is what we see. One of the weaknesses of our college collection is that some of the material was labeled. The rest of it is referencing logbooks. So for you to get the full information on this malachite from Chile, you need to cross-reference a couple different ledgers. So that's very time consuming. That doesn't get you your information as quickly. But if they were digitized, you would be able to find that information much, much faster. So we were lucky enough to be offered Dr. Rowe's personal collection. And this collection is a bit larger than the university one. It was originally in there's a fifth cabinet, these cabinets. And what's really special about his collection, besides its quality, is he was an excellent curator. So rather than having his logbooks to reference every specimen, they're all written exactly on the labels. So instead of having to do this very complicated reconstruction work, we have all of the information there. Oh, sorry, Brian.
Oh, no, it's fine. Turn down the feedback.
Sure, thank you. So his collection is a little bit smaller. It's only about 7,000 specimens, and his breakdown is a little different. He had a lot more representation from Arizona, and then a more balanced USA worldwide. But the real power with his collection is the information and the excellence of his curation. So this is an example of what's his collection, and as you can see, we have the source, which in this case is the Arizona Sonora Desert Museum. We have the description, we have the date of acquisition in 1980. The earliest pieces in his collection date back to when he was working with Lazard Khan in 1934. So every specimen, for the most part, at least 90% have that date of acquisition, the acquisition source, and a pretty detailed description. So Dr. Rowe had quite a few specialties. One of his favorites was inclusions. So here we have a gypsum crystal with tiny fluorite inclusions. So these little purple cubes. We also have some pretty spectacular inclusions like these hematite rings in quartz. So the hematite is what you can see right here. This one is pretty spectacular with an almost perfect sphere and outer shell ring. So these are, he really had a clear eye to find these unusual inclusions. And again, the quality of the information. So we know this was mounted and collected in October 31st, 1997, who he got it from, the location. So this gives you not only beautiful things to look at and interesting features to learn about, but a really great reference with thorough information to verify it. He also was a big lover of phantoms. So a phantom crystal, does anyone know what a phantom means? Do you want to share with the class or shall I? Yeah, so a phantom just means that it's a stage in the growth of the crystal where there was a color change or some other chemical change so that you can see the pattern that the crystal grew in. So when we look at this dark purple shape, you can see that the crystal changed and now the fluorite was growing clear. So it helps students and researchers understand how crystals grow and to also see maybe what was going on from a geochemical point of view. And this is one of my favorites that I have found so far. This is a zoned wolfenite crystal. So you can see that it goes from yellow to orange. So again, we get to see kind of what Dr. Rowe really loved and what he was interested in developing. And this one comes from Tiger, Arizona in 1979. His other favorite that I think he was relatively famous for doing a lot of talks on is impaled crystals. So does anyone know what an impaled crystal is? I see some nodding. Okay. So an impaled crystal basically means where you have two crystals growing and they touch or bisect each other and you have two completely different minerals in one. So here we have hemimorphite, which is the larger blade-like crystals with two calcites that have been impaled. And so again, the strength of these impalements and that you really can see in micros is you get these perfect examples where you have these two crystals with their full terminations in context. At a larger size, they're more likely to be damaged, they're more likely to be imperfect. And this one is from 1989. Okay, so this is a pyrite impaled on Jamesonite. Can anyone see where the pyrite is? I'll give you a second to look. Okay. So there's a couple. Here's the big one, right? So a big, perfect pyrite cube, several smaller ones, all impaled on the Jamesonite. And again, the details, we know who he got it from, when, the locality. So it's very in context. This is my favorite. It was very hard to photograph, so I apologize. This is a calcite impaled on naturalite. So our naturalite are the blade-like crystals here, which again, extremely delicate, easy to break. And we have our larger calcites, two of them. And again, you can hopefully see there's nice crystal terminations and faces, as well as all of these tiny little calcites. So again, imagining this piece at scale, the likelihood that it would have broken either coming out of the mine or since it was collected in '76, that kicking around museum storage for 50 years, this piece survived because it is in micro form. His other specialty was tiger. So we have, it's interesting because most of his collection is arranged alphabetically by species, but he has 5 drawers at the end that are devoted to tiger. So clearly tiger was an interest and a specialty. So we have the diaptase, which is the green mineral, on the wolfenite. And again, the same level of dating, sourcing, and description. So we're not going to be able to fill our display cases with all of these minerals. Why did the museum take them? So I think you've heard me talk about how excited I am at the level of curation and data many, many times. So that's one of the truly spectacular opportunities with this collection, is that once it is digitized, the amount of information that could be available in a very short amount of time is incredible. So we could be searching by show me everything from, hello, from 1934. So we could pull things by date, we can pull things by species, we can pull things by locality, by source. So this information is important both for people who are curious, but also in the historic and scientific research of minerals and localities. That if you want to reconstruct the timeline of mining of a particular place, you need to know when those samples came out, you need to know where exactly they're from, and some of them have notes about the details of the locality as well. So it's quite detailed information. So this is something that, as you can see, my curator and exhibit manager, they're very excited for it to look at the collection from that perspective, right? The other thing that is really, really important to us is the educational potential. So as I mentioned, we are part of the university, and one of our charges is to help teach our students now. We also educate the public. The youngest person I've had look at a micromount is about 6 or 7. And the oldest is all the way up, right? So one of the things that we can provide as a museum is an opportunity to actually look at real samples and do some meaningful work. So if someone sees these beautiful minerals in display cases, usually it's kids. It's always the most humbling experience when they go, okay, that's fine. But when they get to look at it for themselves under a microscope, they've actually participated in understanding what they're looking at. So an example of that would be, here we have a wolfenite that's described as 2 generations. So if you're an undergrad and you're asked, describe this sample, explain what that means, you're gonna have to do some research, you're gonna have to do some observation, and you're gonna have to look at this sample carefully. So I'm gonna ask you to humor me and say, okay, 2 generations, that means there were 2 patterns of growth of the wolfenite. Can we observe, what do you think the 2 different patterns of growth might be? So take a few minutes to just look. Does anyone want to hazard a guess of what they think the 2 different phases might be? I feel like you know, so. So would you like to break that down for folks who maybe doesn't know what that means?
Okay, well, you'll see a lot of them, the crystals, some of them have a pointy termination.
Like these guys?
Those are called bipyramidal. It's mainly a crystal can be composed of a prism and a pyramid. A prism being the main body and a pyramid being the termination. Bipyramidal is basically 2 terminations put together. Mm-hmm. And then you look at up in the top center, there's one that looks like it has a square end on it. That's purely a prismatic wolfenite with no real pyramid. Or bipyramidal and then prismatic with no pyramid.
Yep.
That's somewhat unusual both in color and habit for blood.
Exactly. So to be able to get there, someone has to actually really carefully look at what they're seeing. You can't walk by the display case and see your major feature. You have to actually really look at what you're seeing. So those are some of the scientific skills we're hoping to build, not just in our mineralogists, but our students in general. Observation, identification. That wasn't me. And then usually this gets people more curious, right? That if you learn how something formed once, that might help you be curious about what else forms in 2 generations, what other options are there in wolfenite, why is it forming these 2 different ways. So I'm going to make you humor me with one more example. So this is wolfenite coated with smithsonite, ? So if I was going to ask you, what are you seeing? I'm going to give you a few minutes to take a look. So I think the first thing we might want to observe is how many different contexts we see. So we see there's some little pale green, pale blue pieces. We see some gray. We see yellow with gray, different shades of gray. We see a nice little cube here, right? So all of those would be kind of the exercise. And this works from people as young as 7 or 8. up to college courses, to adults. Not many people get to actually go through that exercise. So again, we're seeing different levels of, here's the smithsonite, the wolfenite, and some different intergrowth. So I'd like to extend a huge thank you to the Rowe family who entrusted us with this collection and wanted to see it being used by undergrads. We are also very lucky in that Arthur's son, Nick, curated the collection for several decades after his death and is going to be helping us develop the curation of this and fill in some of the blanks about, how to best catalog it, its history. The collection got to move around quite a bit. It was in Tucson, it was shipped to Houston, and now it's back in Tucson. And most importantly, it's back with the the Mines collection that he curated in the first place. So between these two, we are aiming for digitization and educational efforts. So, any questions?
Are also like sectors a
Mm.
lot, and he was a really nice guy. He was constantly gentleman, and the closest thing he ever came to cussing that I know was the guy excited about a mineral in the hot spit.
Oh.
That was
Yeah.
he was cool.
Yeah, and you can tell that he must have been a gentleman because of the number of collectors and people who contributed pieces to his collection, that we have them all represented, that, yeah, many people are in that collection as well. Mm-hmm.
Are the specimens and microscopes accessible public
Mm-hmm. Yep, so we do not only use the collection in our specific activities or field trips, but our goal is to have a catalog where people can request, I want to see these 20 and make an appointment. So this is what all of the photos that you saw today were generated on. So it's not, the nicest tech. We also do like to torture people and make them use microscopes, so they actually learn how to use a microscope. But we would like people to be able to actually access them. And that was a huge part of the Rowe family's gift, was that they wanted it to be a used collection, not locked in a basement and preserved. And I brought about 12 samples. So if people want to come up and take a look, practice the focal point, I also invite you to do that.
When this is digitized, will it be publicly accessible?
Yes, that's our goal.
We can digitize like a QR code to it so they can find stuff or identify full have to do the QR code.
So I don't think we'd actually be able to fit a QR code on the box. So we would probably do a more traditional, the unique numbering system. With a collection that's going to total out at about 14,000, we're going to have to make sure we have some fail safes to actually get unique numbers on things and get them backtracked. You can see on some of them, Arthur Rowe also assigned his own numbers. So this little 94, that's his number. So we might want to use his number to kind of keep as much correlation to any existing publications or talks as possible. But we would, again, this is one of the wonderful things about micros, is you can't really put a big old number on a wolfenite specimen, but you can certainly put it on the side of a box. So we'd be able to tag them by boxes, and there's very little chance that that sample is going to separate from that box. Mm-hmm. Great questions. Anybody curious to look at a few samples? Yeah, thank you.
That was a wolf talking about the Arthur Rowe collection. And if you are in Tucson and you haven't had a chance to go down to the Alfie Norville Museum, make sure you well worth your time. So that is going to do it for us today for our live presentation. Tune back in tomorrow. We're going to Katia Scarpelli at 11 a.m. How she and Nardo put together mosaics that have been covered many times under Blue Cat Production channel. So that is at 11 a.m. And also check out the Blue Cat Productions YouTube page because we just posted the fourth of 4 different kind of previews of what these live workshops, Scarpelli workshops, are like here at the gallery. And there's one going on right now. So if you happen to be in Tucson, but come back 11 a.m. Katia Scarpelli, going to be talking about the Scarpelli mosaics, followed by, excuse me, Ukrainian artist Stenia Lefterova at 1:30, talking about she paints and brings these wonderful minerals to life. That is going to do it for us today. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Have a great afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are. And hey, we're going to leave you with a little music. Take care.